Brad Stevens is getting ready and has his next move centered around one key position, and that is right, it is the center one, as there are many names that are going to be competing for this Celtics center spot. So Patrick and I are going to hop in a video and look at the rotation that Joe Mazzulla has so far, and who could be some surprise instances or people that could be blossoming through those ranks. We're going to be diving into the latest from Brad Stevens on that position on the latest here on Celtics Digest. I'm Bruce Veliz, like I said, with my co-host Patrick Billings. And Patrick, an interesting episode today following the Summer League with some good performances from this position. We get to dive in and explore one of the big mysteries for the Celtics so far this offseason.
Yeah, it's a mystery for sure, and it's definitely a position that we thought was going to be filled more in the draft, definitely earlier on, but now what Brad Stevens is saying, there's a lot of questions up in the air to who's going to be that starting center, and there's a couple of options, and we'll see who it ends up being.
100%. And I'm very excited to get into this video and kind of dive into the center position because it's been a hot topic and a main discussion of Celtics fans everywhere, and I think we're going to have some good inside stuff to really break down to kind of give some insight on some predictions on who could really stand out. So without further ado, let's dive into this news and break it all down. Patrick, make sure to grab that snack as always. As you mentioned, a center by committee, and that's exactly really what Brad Stevens had to say about this new center rotation. As we look at from the latest quotes, we had a video talking about this earlier, but wanted to dive in a little bit more and kind of centralize it a little more in. As Brad Stevens says, we're going to find out about the center rotation, right? I think we've had an incredible luxury with Luke and Nemi as our third and fourth centers over these last couple of seasons because I think they were much better than that. And I think Luke will have an amazing impact in San Antonio, and I think Nemi has a great chance to be impactful here. We've always liked Luka Garza from afar, and we think that he has the real physicality that's necessary on both ends of the floor, especially on the glass, in addition to his ability to score. And then they also got Amari Williams, who's now down at the Summer League, which we'll get into in a little while of how intriguing he's been so far, and they think that that has some high upside. Not to mention they can flex other guys into that center role like Xavier Tillman, who's probably more of a 4, but can flex into that center role, and they'll have to do that by committee. This will not be the group that the people will single out based on paper or what they've done with their careers thus far as our strongest position, but it's up to them to prove it otherwise. And when Patrick kind of dive in and look at this center rotation, like for the Boston Celtics so far, looking at ESPN, you grab this. Luka Garza is said to start with Neemias Queta, Xavier Tillman, and Amari Williams. Amari Williams being on a scheduled potential two-way deal as well, so only 3 centers, and all of them not really having legitimate or longevity success as a starter here in the NBA, kind of been some backup positions. So when you hear this coming out of Brad Stevens, what's your kind of main takeaways from all of this, and what are you expecting to see within some of this rotation?
Yeah, well, first of all, it kind of feels expected just because of the situation that they've been in with the second apron and trying to get out of all this tax-paying dollars and all these whole different types of terms that everyone's starting to learn, as well as myself. But I mean, when you look at the roster and how much money is being paid out and how much they gave to Luka Garza, I mean, they're kind of just trying to work out with what they have. And I mean, I totally understand it with the situation that they're in. I mean, Jayson Tatum kind of being out this year, they kind of get to see what they got and just kind of take some chances on a couple of these guys, because Brad Stevens apparently has been looking at Luka Garza for years. And Neemias Queta started a couple of games for the Boston Celtics. Xavier Tillman started games in Memphis. I mean, a couple capable guys of, playing in that starting position, but how confident are you in these guys, especially with the amount of minutes that they're playing? Well, there's only one way to find out, and that's when the season starts and see what they could do in those first couple of weeks. I think that's going to be that big figuring out time to see who sticks the best.
Yeah, and I think ultimately similar to how we saw the Celtics last year with Kristaps Porziņģis when he was out, kind of switching in that center rotation between Luke Kornet and Neemias Queta to kind of see who was going to stand out, or depending on matchup. I think we're going to see that a lot with the Boston Celtics going into this season, specifically with those guys like we mentioned of Luka Garza, who Brad Stevens mentioned a good beast on the glass, probably a little bit more offensive, Neemias Queta a little bit more defensive. We'll get into them in just a little bit here, but Patrick, we dive in and we explore the center room. We know that it's going to be a tough kind of grind for these guys, and there's some other mystery names as well that we can dive into as well to explore in this center rotation. So let's get into it, and let's go over what to expect as we dive in and explore the names here that are in the Celtics rotation so far. And maybe some surprise ones that could make it there down the line. The first one I would like to mention and talk about is Neemias Queta. Obviously, a guy that's played backup big for the Celtics, started off on a two-way deal. He's had to go over some things to fix, right? Setting some screens, being a little bit more stable on the defensive end, not to be running around, finishing around the rim. But if he can live up to those expectations, I think he can be a solid backup big for this team down the line, and maybe could even give him some shining bright lights as a lob threat as well.
Yeah, I think that his talent is pretty raw. I think there's a lot of things that he could still work on, but if he is the guy, if this is what we're kind of getting at, if these are the starters for the Celtics, and if he's the guy in the starting role and we see him kind of getting 20 to 25 minutes a game, I think that's going to totally help his game out a ton, because I think he does have some good touch. You've seen a lot of good flashes of what he can do. He's a big body, can definitely grab some rebounds, and I think if you give him more opportunity to just get the burn, I think that he is totally capable of being a big body down low. You're not going to see him stretch at all, just your classic kind of center, what we used to see, not like we see now with people taking 30-footers like we saw with KP. But, I mean, I think of him as a little bit of a lob threat and someone that could just kind of get a post move or two that he could kind of just go to every time that he's got the one-on-one down low, because, like I said, he is a big body, and I think that he can be capable of playing a big role for them when it just comes to kind of getting a tough bucket or just relying on him to get a rebound over somebody that's just as big as him.
Yeah, I completely agree. And he's one of the guys that I've always been intrigued and interested in within this team. Obviously, coming in on a two-way and having some high upside. He was one of those guys competing for the G League MVP a couple years ago with the Kings, and now obviously has made a name for himself, obviously being the first Portuguese player to get a guaranteed contract. Very interesting to see a guy in Queta, and hopefully he can kind of look pretty solid within the Celtics rotation this season as well. Another one, like you mentioned, Xavier Tillman, had some starts with Memphis, came in late in the championship run, had a nice three there in the finals, but unfortunately this season didn't really get seen that much playing time, fell behind Luke Cornett and Neemias Queta this season. Didn't look that great laterally defensively, had some struggles with the shot, but I still think the shades of baby Al Horford could potentially be in a guy in Xavier Tillman if he can get to that full potential, and if he's given more of a leash this season, even though we might see a little bit more flaws within his game from him getting more playing time, I also think that means we could also see him a little bit more of blossoming potential as well.
Yeah, I think the one thing about him when he first came in, I was pretty surprised that he wasn't getting as much minutes as I thought he would, because of how much he was getting in Memphis. He was starting a decent amount of games, getting a lot of playing time, and kind of came over to the Celtics, and his role kind of just flipped to an end of the bench guy and really wasn't getting much opportunity. He's a little bit smaller, like you said. I mean, baby Al Horford, that's just the best way to explain it. He's kind of working on his three-point game. We've seen him in the workouts and taking him more in games too, and I think that's the role that he's going to have to play. He could totally play the four right next to Queta and a lot of these other center positions, and we've seen the Celtics love doing that before, and I think that I could see him doing that more than just being that total five. But the one thing to him is being able to guard a couple guys on the wing, and I think that's the one kind of flaw of his game, is just not being able to stay in front of a lot of guys, because he's not the quickest. He's a wider frame, but I mean, again, baby Al Horford. I mean, if he could turn into more of an Al Horford when it comes to guarding on the wing, then that's a total win for the Boston Celtics, and I think that's the role that he's going to get. I think it's going to be the Al Horford role. Hopefully, we'll see Al Horford come back. That's still in my mind, but who knows, man? The Celtics are in a tough spot, and hopefully Xavier Tillman can kind of just turn into half of what Al Horford was.
Yeah, I would agree, and I'm still not going to rule out that Al Horford potential of coming back either. Until it is finalized, pen to paper with him with another team, I'm always going to have that interest of him coming back, and I always will. You know, when it does happen, if he does, be like, we told you so over here on Celtics Digest. But like we said with Xavier Tillman, like you mentioned as well, a little bit more of a tweener, kind of more of a four, like Brad kind of said, not maybe traditionally that five, but could play some of that small ball five. And I think the key point that you mentioned, Patrick, is him having that defense like Al Horford. We see Al Horford kind of match up some against some of those better defenders, those Giannis's, those LeBron James. I'm not asking for Xavier Tillman to be able to match up that immediately, right? But I'm asking to just be a solid defender and be able to hold his own on the defensive end. Even when the Cavs have guys like Darius Garland trying to attack, they always look for that mismatch on Al Horford. And he's been able to notoriously hold his own on Darius Garland from when we looked at the stats in the past. So clearly, if a guy like Xavier Tillman can learn some of those tweaks and kind of get some of those underneath his feet, I think he definitely could be a little bit more promising than in past seasons. But when you look at the new guy coming to Boston, that is Luka Garza, someone that a lot of people are familiar with. A lot of people were absolutely furious that we said he was going to be a good pickup for the Boston Celtics because they don't think that Luka Garza is going to be able to stand out. But like Brad Stevens said, really dominant on the glass, more an offensive big than a defensive big, a little bit slower, but like we've talked about in the past, has been able to slim down from college. So maybe that little bit of an NBA frame can make him a little bit more mobile in this Celtics rotation. And with the league going closer to double big, maybe he could be a little bit more of a threatening outside three-point shooter with Jayson Tatum out.
Yeah, I love Luka Garza getting an opportunity. I've been kind of just talking about it for a very long time. He's done great in the G League. It's kind of like, why is he even down there at a point? And just the way that he's evolved his game. I mean, he's always had great footwork, amazing touchdown low, and he's kind of gained this pretty good three-point shot as well. So he's able to stretch, so it gives the Celtics the look that they want, that they got from a guy like Porziņģis. He can't stretch it that far. But, I mean, he's definitely capable of shooting a decent amount of threes a game, especially if you give him the productivity, just kind of giving him the minutes, 20, 25 minutes a game, like I said with Neemias Queta. You give that to Luka Garza, I mean, definitely one of the best scorers of these options, in my personal opinion, because of how well he could shoot a jumper and how well he has touchdown low. And I think that a lot of Celtics fans are going to be surprised by the way that he plays just because he was an end-of-the-bench guy. Really wasn't getting any opportunity. And the way that I'm talking about it, you probably think that he's gotten those 15 to 20 minutes a game, and he hasn't. But you've seen in his game, but it's just he's sat behind so many great centers as well. But now it's his time to step up. He's got that vet mindset, and I think that he's going to be pretty solid. And if ESPN's saying he's the starter right now, I mean, I totally wouldn't mind it right now for him being the starter for the Celtics.
Yeah, I know a couple of my boys as well would definitely not be minding Luka Garza starting for the Celtics team. Those guys over there being those Luka Garza big supporters as well. But like you mentioned, Patrick, even in Minnesota, behind all those bigs, it's been tough and difficult, but definitely better than a G League player, in my opinion, as well. Kind of similar to like a J.D. Davidson kind of situation with the Boston Celtics. So I do think he has a little bit more upside. We'll have to see what Garza can bring. And then finally, Patrick, let's dive in and let's talk about the two guys that we just talked about for the Summer League that just balled out here. If you missed that video from yesterday, go check that one out, as Celtics had a fantastic performance in which both of these players had some key moments. The first one we'll dive in and talk about is Amari Williams. He was the selection in the second round for the Celtics at pick 46 from Kentucky. Our boy Nick NBA was on here multiple times talking about how he's a great passer, how he's going to be flourishing potentially with this Celtics team. He's something that they could utilize, and that cross-court pass to Miles Norris for that three was amazing. So Amari Williams, what could he really bring for the Celtics, and what were your kind of first impressions from him? Because we hadn't seen anything from Amari Williams before today so far on the Celtics.
Yeah, I think my first impressions, I mean, just seemed like a very solid player. I mean, of course, just the first game, didn't really get to see too much on the offensive end. Was hoping he'd get a little bit more rebounds, but the other guys were definitely some rebound merchants today, so I totally understand it. But, I mean, you see some flashes in his passing game, like you said, but I think the one thing, again, that I just want to see from him is what he's got in the low post. I want to see him have a couple of moves to make me feel a little bit more comfortable. But what I expect from him, he's a two-way guy. So there's not too much expectations that you could have right now. He's not going to be the starting center like we are talking about. That's probably the one clear-cut guy that won't be starting. But maybe when he does come up, there's an opportunity for him to start if he's playing so well. I could totally see that. But I think when he comes up, I think he'll definitely have the opportunity to actually see the court for a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he's definitely the guy out of all the guys that we've mentioned so far and will mention that is not going to be that clear-cut starter for the Celtics, being on that two-way contract and most likely playing for the main Celtics. But he presents a lot of qualities to what the Celtics need. And I know you and I talked about this on the stream this past week, where the Celtics need to find these key players that can fill in these key roles that have already been so successful for how their offense and defense have run. And you need that type of passing big with losing Al Horford, with losing Luke Cornett, and ultimately the bigs that are in this rotation can't really supplement that, right? So you go and you get a guy in Amari Williams who might be a little bit more of a project piece, but who knows? When you need that passing big in 2 to 3 seasons, if he can be that bench big at some point for this Celtics team, past this two-way contract potentially this year, or even into a couple seasons where he's looking like he can maybe be an end-of-the-bench guy or, fringe rotational piece, that's where I think he can truly make an impact. Ultimately, we'd like to see a little bit more on the offensive side as well, but we'll see how that works into Game 2 here on Sunday. And then lastly, Charles Bassey, the mystery man, as we call him here. Gotta talk about him. Patrick, let it roll on your boy.
I can go first, absolutely. So I'll kind of get into this again. This is why we're calling him the mystery man. We're seeing him in an Instagram post randomly, wasn't on the Summer League roster, and here he was getting minutes on the Summer League team in their first game. And talk about impressive. I mean, on the offensive end, he was great, kind of catching a lob there. I mean, and also getting a couple blocks down low. I mean, his athleticism is great. Definitely has some experience. Still pretty young at 24 years old. Definitely lengthy. I said to you, Bruce, kind of giving me some Time Lord vibes, maybe a little bit taller, but that's just how quick of a step he had when it kind of went up for a block. That's what it reminded me of. But this is a guy who's played in the league for a couple of years, played in the G League for a year or two as well for two different teams. And I think that the Celtics really do love him, but they just don't have the roster spot. But the reason why we talk about it is because clearly they have their eye on him to put him on that roster last second when their roster is full. And I think that he was impressive. It definitely deserves the opportunity because when I'm looking at all five of these guys, I don't see why he shouldn't have the opportunity to start for the Celtics for games next year as well.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. I think you put him into those same conversations of Xavier Tillman, Nemish Queta, and Luka Garza. He kind of fits into those conversations, right? So why shouldn't he have that opportunity? Clearly proved today in the Summer League. Him and Amari Williams, I don't want to forget to mention this. I know it's a Summer League game, but they were huge. Like, they looked like they were towering over those Grizzlies guys, right? Like, they looked like they were big giants down low, and that's what you want to see as well. So I don't think that Bassey's obviously a two-way, a G League guy, maybe potentially a two-way guy, depending on how the Celtics look within their roster. Maybe they bring him on as a two-way, look to do a move later down in the season, then bring him up to a guaranteed contract and still have him play on that two-way deal if they can't get a roster spot clear. But if they can get that roster spot clear, he should be someone that they should be keeping an eye on and at least be giving the opportunity, right? We mentioned the mystery man. Photos taken of him on Instagram at practice. No one really knows or can confirm that he's going to be with anybody or with the team. Then he's just at Summer League and posts a double-double in his first game. Yeah, come on. Sign me up for some Charles Bassey. Get him on over to Boston after this Summer League. Get that pen to paper and let's get working. Because you look at this depth chart, right, Patrick? We mentioned Luka Garza, Nemish Queta, Xavier Tillman, Amari Williams. You add Charles Bassey into that list. Move Amari Williams down to that fifth spot. Obviously, it's not blatantly, nice center, but you got four guys competing, right? And even if the Celtics do make some other moves down the line or for the other season, they could find potentially one, if not two, key backup centers that could go back into this role that Brad Stevens was talking about when they do get stacked again, where they have good quality centers, where guys like Luke and Nemi being their third and fourth guys is too valuable. And maybe they have guys like Luka Garza, Nemish Queta, maybe even Charles Bassey be in that 2-3 kind of center rotation. And I think that's very interesting. So, Patrick, before we sign off, when looking at all five of these guys, Amari Williams, Xavier Tillman, Nemish Queta, Luka Garza, and Charles Bassey, if you had to make your prediction right now, obviously Bassey's not under the roster, but I'll let him slide for this. What do you think is going to be the starting Celtics center on day one?
Day one. Oof. I think day one, with the way that Brad's talking, man, it might be Luka Garza. I think I'm just going to have to go with my gut on that one because my mind's telling me to say to me is Queta just because he's been around with the team. But I think that Luka Garza might end up being the starting center on day one.
I honestly would not be surprised if Luka Garza is the starting center on day one. I'm going to go different. I'm going to go with the guy that you were thinking of picking, and we would have agreed on, Nemish Queta, just because he's had the experience here with this Celtics team. But you mentioned Luka Garza being that offensive beast maybe on the glass that the Celtics could use with Jayson Tatum being out with no rebounds, missing Porziņģis. Maybe he gets that start because the Celtics really need that pressure on the boards and could very, very use that in a guy in Garza. Maybe they trust a little bit more and isn't going to be flying around as much in a guy in Nemish Queta out there in the starting lineup. But ultimately, the Celtics will be running a center by committee this season, and by the looks of it, these are the guys that are presented for you. So ultimately, down below in the comment section, let us know who was impressed with you guys from this Celtics center rotation, who you guys would like to see, who you guys would not like to see, and ultimately, the final question of the mystery man revolving around Charles Bassey. Is there a potential of him making that final roster? Let us know down below in the comment section. Patrick and I Really do appreciate all the love and support you guys have been giving us on these videos. We've been doing a pretty solid job breaking down all the latest news revolving around the team. So if you want to make sure you stay up to date on everything and help us continue to grow after hitting that 7,000 subscriber mark, which we really do appreciate, make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and share the Celtics channel to all your Celtics friends. Without further ado, we'll be signing off on today's video. So have a great rest of your day and go Boston Celtics. Peace out, everyone.